This can't be what I think it is. Emma Sterling's hands trembled as she stared at the ultrasound photo that had fallen from her best friend's purse. The purse she'd grabbed by mistake from the coffee table, where they'd both set their identical black bags. The image was unmistakable. A tiny profile, delicate features, and at the bottom, a date that made her stomach drop into free fall. 8 weeks along. Her mind raced backward, counting days, calculating the timeline. 8 weeks ago, she'd been in Maine, spending her savings on that surprise cabin rental. The one overlooking the lake where David had proposed 5 years earlier. She'd driven 12 hours each way, photographing every spot that held meaning for them, creating a memory book she'd planned to give him for their anniversary next week. While she'd been capturing images of their love story, someone else had been creating a new one. Emma, you grabbed my... Melissa's voice cut off as she appeared in the kitchen doorway, her face going white when she saw what Emma held. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire about to snap. Emma looked up at her best friend since college, the woman who'd been her maid of honor, who'd helped her pick out the dress she'd worn to marry David, who'd held her hand through her father's funeral just 6 months ago. Whose baby is this, Mel? Melissa's eyes darted toward the stairs where David's voice could be heard on a work call in his office. When she looked back, tears were already streaming down her cheeks. Emma, I can explain. Whose baby? Emma's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of a breaking heart. Melissa opened her mouth, then closed it, the truth written across her guilty features like a confession she couldn't voice. Emma felt the ultrasound photo slip from her numb fingers, floating to the kitchen floor like a feather carrying the weight of her entire world. The photo landed face up between them, that tiny profile staring back like an accusation. The sound of David's office door opening upstairs made them both freeze. Babe, whose car is in the driveway? David's voice called down, casual and unsuspecting. Emma looked at Melissa, and in that moment, she saw something that shattered her completely. Not just guilt, but tenderness. The kind of soft, protective expression Melissa had never shown for anyone's children before. The kind of look that spoke of dreams and futures and names written in baby books. How long? Emma breathed. Emma, please. How long? David's footsteps on the stairs stopped abruptly at her raised voice. Melissa wrapped her arms around her still flat stomach in an unconsciously protective gesture. Since your dad's funeral. The words hit Emma like a physical blow. Her father's funeral. The day she'd been so broken with grief that she'd gone to bed early, leaving David downstairs to help Melissa clean up after the wake they'd hosted at their house. She'd been grateful then. So grateful that her husband was taking care of details she couldn't handle, that her best friend was staying late to wash dishes and put away folding chairs. She'd thank them both the next morning for letting her rest. Emma. David appeared in the kitchen, his work shirt slightly wrinkled, his hair mussed in a way that suddenly seemed suspicious. What's going on? Mel, I thought you left an hour ago. Emma picked up the ultrasound photo with steady hands, though her heart was beating so hard she was sure they could both hear it. She held it up without looking at David, watching Melissa's face instead. Congratulations, she said, her voice eerily calm. I had no idea you two were trying for a baby. The color drained from David's face as his eyes fixed on the image in Emma's hand. For just a moment, one devastating, confirming moment, she saw something flicker across his features. Not confusion. Not surprise. Recognition. And in the space between heartbeats, Emma realized that the anniversary gift she'd spent weeks preparing, the photo album of their 5-year love story, the vow renewal she'd secretly planned, the weekend getaway to the cabin where they'd promised to love each other forever. All of it was sitting upstairs in her closet, ready to celebrate a marriage that had died while she was trying to save it. Welcome, friends, to a story about the memories we build while the people we trust are building entirely different lives behind our backs. Sometimes the hardest truth isn't that love dies. It's that it continues to live in all the wrong places. David, Emma said quietly, her voice carrying a strength that surprised even her. I think we need to talk. But as she looked between the two people she'd trusted most in the world, Emma realized that talking was the last thing any of them were prepared to do. Not when the truth was lying on the kitchen floor between them, innocent and perfect and completely devastating. The ultrasound photo stared back at all three of them. A tiny life that would grow up knowing it had been born from the ashes of someone else's dreams. And Emma, devoted, trusting, memory-making Emma, was about to discover just how much betrayal the human heart could hold before it stopped believing in love altogether. David moved first, stepping toward Emma with his hands raised like she was a wild animal he needed to calm. "Emma, let me explain." "Don't." The word came out sharper than Emma intended, but it stopped him mid-step. "Just don't move. Either of you." She needed space to think, to breathe, to process what felt like reality fracturing around her. The kitchen that had been her sanctuary, where she'd made David's favorite breakfast every Sunday morning, where she'd planned surprise parties and anniversary dinners, suddenly felt like a crime scene. Emma had always been the kind of person who fixed things. Growing up as the eldest of 3 daughters after their mother died, she'd learned early that love meant anticipating needs before they were spoken. When her little sisters needed help with homework, Emma stayed up late researching answers. When her father worked double shifts to keep them afloat, Emma packed lunches and signed permission slips, and made sure everyone felt cared for. She'd brought that same instinct to her marriage. When David mentioned missing the spontaneity they'd had while dating, Emma planned surprise weekend trips. When he seemed stressed about work, she'd research his projects and ask thoughtful questions over dinner. When he'd grown distant after her father's death 6 months ago, she'd assumed he needed space to grieve in his own way. She'd never considered that he might be grieving the loss of his wife's attention by finding comfort in someone else's arms. "How could you not tell me you were trying for a baby?" Emma asked Melissa, though her eyes remained fixed on David's guilty face. "We talk about everything. We talked about my dad's death. We talked about David's promotion. We talked about my fertility concerns after I went off birth control 8 months ago." The words hung in the air like an accusation. Emma had confided in Melissa about wanting to start a family, about tracking her cycle, about the disappointment each month when the pregnancy tests came back negative. She'd even asked Melissa to come with her to the doctor when she'd started worrying something might be wrong. "Oh God," Emma whispered as another piece clicked into place. "The doctor's appointment. You came with me to the fertility specialist 3 weeks ago." Melissa's face crumpled. "Emma, you sat in that waiting room while I cried about not being able to give David a baby. You held my hand when the doctor said everything looked normal, and that sometimes these things just take time." Emma's voice grew stronger, fueled by a rage she'd never felt before. "You were already pregnant with his child." David finally found his voice. "It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think." Emma spun toward him, and for the first time in their 5-year marriage, she saw him flinch. "You got my best friend pregnant while I was begging doctors to figure out why I couldn't conceive your baby." The cruel irony wasn't lost on her. For months, she'd been tracking ovulation windows and reading fertility books, believing that starting a family would bring them closer together. She'd even bought prenatal vitamins, still sitting in their medicine cabinet upstairs like a monument to misplaced hope. "The funeral," Emma said slowly, the memory reshaping itself with this new, horrible context. "You said you needed to talk to someone about grief. You said men process differently, and that maybe talking to Mel would help since she knew Dad too." She remembered now how grateful she'd been that David was finally opening up about emotional things. Her father had loved David like a son, and she'd thought it was beautiful that David wanted to honor that relationship by grieving properly. "I encouraged it," she whispered, the words tasting like poison. "I told you to spend time with her. I said it would be good for both of you to support each other." Melissa was sobbing now, but Emma felt detached from the sound, as if she were watching this scene happen to someone else. The woman who'd helped her write her wedding vows was carrying her husband's baby. The man who'd promised to love her in sickness and health had been making that baby while she was planning ways to save their marriage. "Emma, please just let us," David started. "No." Emma's voice cut through the kitchen like a blade. "You don't get to let me anything anymore. You don't get to manage the situation or control how I react or fix this with words." She looked at the ultrasound photo on the floor, that tiny profile that represented so many shattered dreams. Not just her dreams of having David's baby, but her dreams of the friend who would be the godmother, the marriage that would last, the trust she'd built her entire adult life around. "I need you both to leave," Emma said quietly. "Emma, this is my house too," David began. "Is it?" Emma's laugh was hollow. "Because I've been living here alone for months, haven't I? While you two were building this," she gestured at the ultrasound, "I was living with a stranger who happened to share my bed." The truth of it hit her like a physical blow. The late nights David claimed were work projects. The weekend when he'd said he was helping his brother move, but came home smelling like Melissa's vanilla perfume. The way he'd stopped initiating intimacy after her father's funeral, claiming grief was affecting his libido. She'd been so understanding, so patient, so focused on giving him space to heal that she'd never considered he was healing with someone else. The photo album, Emma said suddenly, looking up at David. The anniversary gift I've been working on. You've been asking about it for weeks, seeming excited. Were you planning to look at pictures of our love story with your pregnant girlfriend? David's face went ashen. She's not my girlfriend. What is she then? Emma's voice rose. A one-night stand that happened to result in pregnancy? A mistake that's going to call you daddy. Melissa spoke for the first time in minutes, her voice barely audible. We love each other, Emma. The words hit Emma like a slap. Not it was a mistake, or it meant nothing, or any of the cliches that might have offered some microscopic comfort. They loved each other. This wasn't an accident or a moment of weakness or a grief-induced error in judgment. This was a choice. A series of choices, made over weeks and months, while Emma had been planning surprise trips and anniversary gifts and futures that would never exist. How long have you loved each other? Emma asked, her voice eerily calm again. Melissa and David exchanged a look, brief, but Emma caught it. A communication that spoke of shared secrets and intimate knowledge. The kind of look Emma used to think she shared with David. It doesn't matter, David started. It matters to me. How long have you been in love while I've been living a lie? The silence stretched until Emma thought she might scream. Finally, Melissa whispered, Since your wedding. The words landed like a bomb in the quiet kitchen. Emma felt the room tilt, her vision blurring at the edges. My wedding, she repeated dumbly. Emma, it wasn't supposed to happen, Melissa rushed to explain. We never acted on it, we never even talked about it until after your dad. 5 years. Emma's voice was barely a breath. You've both been in love with each other for our entire marriage. She thought about their wedding day, how beautiful Melissa had looked as maid of honor, how David had seemed nervous during the ceremony, how Melissa had caught the bouquet and laughed about being next. She'd thought David's nerves were normal groom jitters. She'd thought Melissa's tears during the vows were from happiness for her best friend. But they'd been crying because they were watching the wrong person get married. I need you both to leave now, Emma said, her voice hollow. Before I do something we'll all regret. Emma, we can work through this, David pleaded. There is no we anymore. Emma looked at him, really looked at him, and realized she didn't recognize the man standing in her kitchen. There's you and her, and the baby you made while I was trying to save a marriage that ended 5 years ago. And there's me, finally seeing clearly for the first time. She walked to the front door and opened it, standing aside like a bouncer ejecting unwanted patrons. David and Melissa gathered their things in silence, the weight of their secret finally exposed. As they moved toward the door, Emma noticed how David's hand briefly touched Melissa's lower back. A protective, intimate gesture that told her everything about how long this had been going on. The anniversary party, Emma said as they reached the threshold. The one I've been planning for next weekend. The one where I was going to surprise you with the photo album and announce our vow renewal. How were you planning to handle that? David's face crumpled. We were going to tell you after. After you let me humiliate myself in front of our families? After I renewed vows to a man who was planning to leave me for my best friend. The cruelty of it took her breath away. They would have let her throw a party celebrating a love that had never existed, surrounded by people who would have pitied her once they knew the truth. Get out, Emma whispered. Both of you. And don't come back. As the door closed behind them, Emma slumped against it, finally allowing herself to feel the full weight of what had just shattered. Her marriage, her best friendship, her faith in her own judgment, her dreams of the family they'd never have. But beneath the devastation, something else was stirring, a flicker of something that felt like anger, but stronger. Something that felt like determination, but fiercer. Emma Sterling had spent her entire life taking care of other people, anticipating their needs, making their lives easier. She'd been so busy building memories for everyone else that she'd forgotten to build a life for herself. That was about to change. Emma stood in her empty house for exactly 47 minutes before her phone started ringing. The first call was from her sister Rachel in Seattle. I just landed. Can't wait for the party this weekend. David's surprise is going to be amazing. Mel told me you've been working on something incredible for months. Emma stared at the phone, watching Rachel's name flash on the screen until voicemail picked up. Then came the text. Driving to hotel now. See you tomorrow for setup. The second call was from David's mother. Then his brother. Then her college roommate who'd flown in from Denver. One by one, The people she'd invited to celebrate her 5th wedding anniversary were arriving in town, expecting a party that would now be a public humiliation. 53 people. She'd confirmed 53 people for Saturday's celebration. Emma walked upstairs to her closet and pulled out the anniversary gift she'd spent 3 months creating. The leather-bound photo album was beautiful. Hand-stitched corners, their names embossed in gold, filled with pictures from every meaningful moment of their relationship. The last page featured 2 empty spots where she'd planned to place photos from their vow renewal ceremony this weekend. Below the album sat the 3-ring binder that contained her real masterpiece, a complete recreation of their first date, planned down to the last detail. She'd researched the exact wine they'd shared at that little Italian restaurant that had closed 2 years ago. She'd tracked down the same jazz musician who'd played that night. She'd even found the exact outfit she'd worn, now a vintage piece she'd paid 3 times its original value to buy back from an online seller. All of it designed to remind David why he'd fallen in love with her in the first place. Emma's laugh echoed in the empty closet, sharp and bitter. She'd been trying to win back a man who'd never been hers to begin with. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Emma, this is Marcus Chun from Hartwell Photography. I wanted to confirm our shoot time Saturday for your vow renewal. Should I plan for the sunset timing we discussed?" Marcus, the photographer she'd hired for the ceremony she'd planned in secret. She'd spent weeks researching photographers, reading reviews, looking at portfolios. Marcus had been perfect. His work captured raw emotion in ways that made her believe in love just by looking at his images. She'd booked him 6 weeks ago, after a consultation where he'd listened to her vision with such genuine enthusiasm that she'd felt like she was hiring an artist, not just a vendor. He'd seemed to understand that this wasn't just about pretty pictures. It was about capturing the moment her marriage transformed into something stronger. Now the irony made her sick. Emma typed back, "There's been a change of plans. Can you call me?" Her phone rang within minutes. "Emma? Is everything all right? You sound..." Marcus's voice was warm, concerned in a way that made something inside her chest crack a little wider. "The vow renewal is cancelled," she said simply. "Actually, the marriage is cancelled too." Silence stretched between them. Then, "Do you want to talk about it?" Something about his voice, calm, non-judgmental, like he photographed life's disasters often enough to know they weren't the end of the world, made Emma sink onto her bedroom floor. "My husband is having a baby with my best friend," she heard herself say. "I found out 2 hours ago. The party I've been planning for months to celebrate our love is happening in 3 days, and 53 people are already in town expecting to watch us renew our vows." "Christ," Marcus said softly. "Emma, I'm so sorry. The worst part is I still have to pay you," she continued, hysteria creeping into her voice. $5,000 for photos of a ceremony that's never happening. It's like paying for documentation of my own stupidity." "Hey," Marcus's voice was firm. "Don't do that to yourself. You were trying to save something you thought was worth saving. That's not stupidity, that's love." Emma closed her eyes, surprised by how much she needed to hear that. "What if we did something different?" Marcus said after a moment. "Different how?" "What if instead of documenting the renewal of something broken, we documented the birth of something new? Your independence. Your freedom. Your first day as someone who doesn't have to pretend anymore." The idea hit Emma like electricity. Not hiding. Not pretending everything was fine. Not canceling the party and letting David and Melissa control the narrative of their betrayal. "You mean still have the party?" she asked slowly. "I mean have your party. Tell the truth. Let people see who you really are when you're not trying to fix everyone else's problems." Emma thought about the catering deposit she'd already paid. The flowers arriving tomorrow. The jazz musician she'd hired. The venue rental at the botanical gardens where David had proposed. That would be... She paused, searching for the word. Crazy. Maybe. Or maybe it would be the sanest thing you've ever done. Emma stood up, still holding the phone, and walked to her bedroom window. Across the street, her neighbor Mrs. Patterson was watering her garden like it was any other Thursday evening. Normal life continuing while Emma's world had imploded. "I'd have to tell everyone the truth," Emma said. "Would that be so bad?" Emma thought about the family members who'd always wondered if David was good enough for her. The friends who'd made jokes about how Melissa never seemed to want Emma to succeed. The colleagues who'd watched Emma sacrifice her own career advancement to support David's ambitions. Maybe they'd already seen what she'd been too loyal to notice. "My sister would probably say she saw this coming," Emma admitted. Would she be right? Emma closed her eyes, remembering signs she'd ignored. David's phone face down during dinner. Melissa's new gym membership that somehow never resulted in them working out together. The way David had stopped asking about Emma's day, but always knew details about Melissa's work drama. Yes, she whispered. She'd be absolutely right. Then maybe it's time to stop protecting people from the truth. Emma felt something shift inside her chest, not quite courage yet, but the absence of fear. For months, she'd been terrified of losing David, of losing Melissa, of losing the life she'd built. But she'd already lost all of that. The only thing left to lose was her dignity, and she was tired of sacrificing that too. If I do this, she said slowly, if I actually tell everyone what happened and turn this into some kind of celebration of my divorce, would you photograph it? Emma, Marcus said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. I'd be honored to photograph it. After she hung up, Emma sat in the quiet of her bedroom and felt something she hadn't experienced in years: anticipation. Not for someone else's happiness or approval, but for her own choices. Her own truth. Her own life. She picked up her phone and opened a group text to her family. Change of plans for Saturday's party. I have some things to share with everyone. Still want you all there, more than ever actually. Trust me on this one. Love you all. Within minutes, her phone was buzzing with confused responses, but Emma felt lighter with each message. For once, she wasn't managing everyone else's emotions or trying to craft the perfect explanation. She was just telling the truth. Emma walked back to her closet and looked at the anniversary album one more time. Then she carried it downstairs to the kitchen table, where she began carefully removing photos. Not to destroy them, but to reclaim them. These were her memories too. Her smile in these pictures was real, even if David's love hadn't been. She would keep the photos that mattered and let go of the story they were supposed to tell. As she worked, Emma realized she wasn't just dismantling an album. She was dismantling a life built on other people's expectations. And for the first time in 5 years of marriage, she was excited to see what she might build instead. The anniversary party would happen, but it wouldn't be celebrating the past. It would be celebrating the future. Her future, whatever that looked like. And if David and Melissa wanted to show up to face the consequences of their choices, that was their decision to make. Emma was done making choices for anyone but herself. Friday morning arrived with the relentless cheerfulness of a day that didn't know it was about to witness a massacre. Emma woke to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Word was spreading. The first call back was to her sister Rachel, who picked up before the first ring finished. Emma, what the hell is going on? I just got a call from David asking if I knew what you were planning for tomorrow. He sounded panicked. Emma poured coffee with steady hands, surprised by her own calm. He should be panicked. You're scaring me. Just tell me straight, are you divorcing him? I'm doing something better than that. I'm choosing myself. Rachel's silence lasted long enough for Emma to wonder if the call had dropped. Finally, it's about time. What do you need me to do? The relief of not having to explain or justify her decision made Emma's throat tight. Just trust me, and maybe prepare everyone else. This isn't going to be what they expected. How not what they expected are we talking? Scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is someone's going to need therapy after this party. Emma thought about the ultrasound photo, still sitting on her kitchen counter like evidence in a crime scene. 15. Good, Rachel said fiercely. I've been waiting 5 years for you to stop making that man the center of your universe. After hanging up, Emma's phone immediately rang again. David. She let it go to voicemail, then listened to his message. Emma, please. We need to talk before you do something you'll regret. I know you're angry, but think about our families. Think about what this will do to everyone. Always managing, Emma thought. Even in the aftermath of his betrayal, David was trying to control her response to it. She deleted the message and called Marcus. How are you holding up? He asked without preamble. Better than I thought I would. Are you free this morning? I want to scout some locations for tomorrow. For the party photos? For the liberation photos, Emma corrected. I want images that show what it looks like when someone stops living a lie. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Emma, can I ask you something? Sure. When you hired me originally, you talked about wanting photos that captured transformation. Not just pretty pictures of a ceremony, but actual change happening. Do you remember that? Emma did remember. She'd been so specific about wanting raw emotion, authentic moments, images that told a story rather than just documenting an event. At the time, She'd thought she was talking about her marriage transforming into something deeper. I remember. What if I told you that conversation is exactly why I want to photograph tomorrow? You're still talking about transformation. It's just a different kind than we originally planned. Something warm spread through Emma's chest. I'd say you're either very wise or very good at making people feel better about their disasters. Maybe both. I'll pick you up in an hour. Emma spent the morning with Marcus, driving around the botanical gardens where tomorrow's party would unfold. What had seemed like a romantic backdrop for vow renewal now felt like the perfect setting for rebirth. The gardens were transitioning from spring to summer, with some flowers dying back, while others burst into full bloom. Life cycles, Marcus observed, adjusting his camera settings as he captured Emma walking among the rose beds. Endings making space for beginnings. He photographed her without asking her to pose, capturing moments when she wasn't paying attention, her hands trailing over garden gates, her face turned toward the sun, her genuine smile as she realized she wasn't performing for anyone anymore. You're different than when we first met, Marcus said as they sat on a bench overlooking the pond where David had proposed. Different how? Sadder, but more real. During our first consultation, you were so focused on creating the perfect moment that you barely seemed present for the actual moment we were having. Emma thought about that meeting 6 weeks ago. She'd come with a Pinterest board and a detailed timeline, talking nonstop about lighting and angles, and making sure every detail was flawless. Marcus had listened patiently, occasionally asking questions that seemed to have nothing to do with photography. What's your favorite memory with David? He'd asked. When Emma had started describing their engagement, Marcus had stopped her. Not the big moments. The small ones. The ones you didn't plan. She'd been unable to answer. Not because there weren't small moments, but because she'd been so busy orchestrating the big ones that she'd stopped noticing anything else. I was trying so hard to create a perfect story that I forgot to live one, Emma said now. Marcus lowered his camera. And now I'm realizing that the imperfect story is actually mine. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Melissa. Please call me. There are things you don't understand. Emma showed Marcus the message. What do you think she wants to tell me? That it was true love? That I should be happy for them? Maybe she wants to explain herself. Or apologize. Do you think I should call her? Marcus studied Emma's face. Do you want to hear what she has to say? Emma considered this. Yesterday, she would have called immediately, desperate to understand, to find some explanation that would make the betrayal hurt less. Today, she realized she didn't need Melissa's version of events to move forward. No, she said. I don't think I do. She blocked the number. They spent the afternoon at Marcus's studio, where he showed Emma some of his other work. Not the wedding portfolios she'd seen online, but a series he called After. Photos of people in the aftermath of major life changes. A woman cleaning out her childhood home after her parents' deaths. A man learning to walk again after an accident. A couple adopting their first child after years of infertility struggles. These are beautiful, Emma said, studying an image of a woman standing in an empty apartment, keys in her hand, light streaming through bare windows. They're heartbreaking and hopeful at the same time. Transition is like that. Endings and beginnings happening simultaneously. Emma paused at a photo that made her breath catch. A bride sitting alone on church steps, still in her wedding dress, but with her shoes off and her bouquet scattered beside her. She looked devastated but somehow free. What happened to her? Emma asked. She found out 3 hours before the ceremony that her fiancé had been stealing money from her business. She called off the wedding but kept the dress on for the photos. Said she wanted to remember what it felt like to choose herself over someone else's lies. Emma stared at the image. The woman's expression was raw, real, unguarded in a way that made Emma's chest ache with recognition. I want photos like this tomorrow, she said quietly. Are you sure? These kinds of images, they show everything. There's no hiding behind smiles or pretending everything's okay. Emma thought about all the photos from her actual wedding day. Beautiful, perfect, airbrushed images that captured none of the anxiety she'd felt, none of David's distraction, none of Melissa's tears that Emma now realized hadn't been from joy. I'm tired of hiding, she said. Marcus nodded. Then we'll show them everything. As they left the studio, Emma's phone rang again. This time it was David's mother, Carol. Emma, sweetheart. David called and said there might be some changes to tomorrow's party. I'm so confused. Is everything all right? Emma closed her eyes. Carol had always been kind to her, had treated her like a daughter from the moment David brought her home. The thought of disappointing this woman who'd welcomed her so completely made Emma's resolve waver. Carol, there have been some developments. I promise I'll explain everything tomorrow. Honey, you're making me worry. Whatever's wrong, we can fix it. David loves you so much, and you two have always been able to work through anything. The innocent faith in Carol's voice nearly broke Emma's heart. This woman had no idea that her son had been living a double life, that the daughter-in-law she'd grown to love was about to shatter her family's illusion of David's character. I love you too, Carol, Emma said, and meant it. I just need you to trust me tomorrow, okay? After hanging up, Emma felt the weight of what she was about to do settling on her shoulders. It wasn't just David and Melissa who would face consequences tomorrow. It was their families, their friends, everyone who'd believed in the story they'd been telling. Second thoughts? Marcus asked gently. Emma looked back at his studio, thinking about those after photos. All of those people had faced moments like this. Moments when telling the truth would hurt innocent people, when keeping quiet seemed kinder, when the easiest thing would be to just keep pretending. But none of them looked like they regretted choosing authenticity over comfort. No, Emma said. No second thoughts. As Marcus drove her home, Emma's phone buzzed with another message, this one from David. I'll give you anything you want in the divorce. Just please don't do this to our families. Emma read it twice, then showed it to Marcus. He thinks this is about revenge, she said. Isn't it? Emma considered this as they pulled into her driveway. I thought it was. But I think it's actually about something else entirely. What? Emma looked at her house. The house where she'd played wife for 5 years, where she'd planned anniversaries and holidays and futures that had never existed. Tomorrow, she would walk away from all of that and become someone new. I think it's about finally meeting myself. That night, Emma sat at her kitchen table and wrote her speech for tomorrow's party. Not an explanation or an apology or a plea for understanding. Just the truth, in her own words, spoken by a woman who'd finally decided she was worth more than the lies people told to make themselves feel better. She was ready to let them all see who Emma Sterling really was when she stopped trying to be who everyone else needed her to be. And if that made them uncomfortable, that was their truth to face, not hers to manage. Saturday morning arrived like a curtain rising on the final act of a play Emma had been unknowingly rehearsing her entire marriage. She woke at dawn, not from anxiety but from clarity, the kind of bone-deep certainty that comes when you finally stop fighting against the current and decide to swim with it instead. Marcus was picking her up at 10 a.m. to begin documenting what he'd started calling her Liberation Day. The party wasn't until 6 p.m., but Emma wanted photos of the preparation, the transformation, the hours before she stepped into her new life. She was applying mascara when her doorbell rang. Through the peephole, Emma saw a woman she didn't recognize, tall, elegant, with silver hair and the kind of composed bearing that suggested money and power. The woman held an envelope and checked her watch with the impatience of someone accustomed to being important. Emma Sterling? The woman asked when Emma opened the door. Yes, I'm Patricia Caldwell, David's boss's wife. We need to talk. Emma's stomach dropped. She'd never met Patricia, but she knew the name. Harold Caldwell owned the investment firm where David had recently made partner. The promotion that had been his excuse for all those late nights and weekend client meetings. Mrs. Caldwell, this really isn't a good time. I'm afraid it is. Patricia's smile was sharp as a blade. May I come in? This concerns your husband's employment and some financial irregularities that have come to light. Emma stepped aside, her mind racing. Financial irregularities? Patricia entered with the confidence of someone who'd delivered unwelcome news before. She settled on Emma's couch and opened the envelope she'd brought, spreading papers across the coffee table like evidence in a trial. Mrs. Sterling, how much do you know about your husband's business dealings? What do you mean? I mean, are you aware that David has been using company funds to finance what appears to be a rather expensive extramarital relationship? The words hit Emma like ice water. She sank into the chair across from Patricia, staring at the papers spread between them. Bank statements, expense reports, hotel receipts. I don't understand, Emma said weakly. Your husband has been charging personal expenses to his company credit card for the past 8 months. Hotels, restaurants, medical expenses. Patricia's finger landed on a receipt that made Emma's vision blur. This is a bill for prenatal vitamins and maternity clothes, charged to our corporate account as client entertainment. Emma felt the room tilt. It was one thing to discover the affair, another entirely to realize David had been stealing to fund it. The medical expenses alone total over $15,000, Patricia continued. Fertility treatments, prenatal care, all billed as business expenses. Fertility treatments? Emma's voice cracked. Patricia's expression softened slightly. I take it you weren't aware your husband has been paying for another woman's pregnancy care? Emma thought about her own fertility doctor visits, the ones she'd paid for herself while David claimed their insurance wouldn't cover the appointments. The ones where Melissa had held her hand while Emma cried about not being able to conceive. There's more, Patricia said gently. The woman in question has been drawing a salary from our company for the past 6 months as a consulting researcher. According to our records, she's earned $38,000 for work that, as far as we can determine, was never performed. Emma's hands were shaking as she picked up the employment documents. There it was, in black and white. Melissa Torres, hired as an independent contractor, paid a substantial monthly fee for market research and client relations. We became suspicious when Harold noticed David requesting unusual accommodations for business trips. Private suites, couple spa packages, romantic dinners. All for supposed client meetings with people we couldn't verify existed. Emma thought about the weekend 3 months ago when David had said he was attending a conference in Napa. The weekend Melissa had claimed she was visiting her sister in Sacramento. They'd been together, on Emma's unknowing dime, playing house while Emma worked overtime to pay their actual mortgage. Mrs. Sterling, I'm telling you this because my investigation has revealed that these transactions may constitute embezzlement. My husband is required to report this to the authorities. Authorities? Emma's voice was barely a whisper. David could face criminal charges. And since you're legally married, there could be implications for your personal assets as well. The company will likely pursue restitution for the stolen funds. Emma stared at the papers, understanding dawning like a slow-motion car crash. Not only had David betrayed her personally, he'd been stealing to do it. And now his crimes could destroy her financially too. How much money are we talking about? She asked. Including the fraudulent salary payments and falsified expenses, approximately $175,000. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. Emma thought about their joint bank accounts, their shared credit cards, the house they'd bought together. Everything she'd worked for could be seized to pay for David's theft. There's something else, Patricia said, her voice taking on an almost apologetic tone. The prenatal care expenses suggest this relationship has been ongoing for longer than 8 months. Some of these charges date back over a year. Emma felt the last of her composure cracking. A year. Not 6 months since her father's funeral. Not 8 weeks since the pregnancy began. David and Melissa had been together for over a year, stealing money and lying to her face while Emma planned anniversary celebrations and fertility treatments. The dates align with several company retreats David attended, Patricia continued. Retreats where he claimed to need extended accommodations for team-building activities. Emma remembered those retreats. She'd been proud of David for being selected, had even encouraged him to network and make the most of the opportunities. She'd stayed home, planning surprise dinners for his return, never knowing he was sharing rooms with her best friend on the company's dime. Patricia gathered the papers. Mrs. Sterling, I wanted you to hear this from me before it becomes public knowledge. Harold will be filing a report Monday morning. You should contact a lawyer immediately, both for the criminal implications and for your divorce proceedings. After Patricia left, Emma sat in her living room surrounded by the wreckage of everything she'd thought she knew. The affair wasn't a recent mistake born from grief. It was a calculated long-term deception funded by theft. David hadn't just betrayed her heart. He'd potentially destroyed her financial future. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. On my way. How are you feeling about today? Emma stared at the message, then at the clock. 9:47 a.m. In 8 hours, she was supposed to stand in front of 53 people and tell them about David's betrayal. But the betrayal was so much worse than she'd known. She called Marcus. Emma? You sound. Can you come now? Everything just changed. I'm pulling into your driveway. When Marcus saw Emma's face, he immediately set down his camera equipment and pulled her into his arms. For a moment, Emma let herself lean against him, feeling the solid warmth of someone who wasn't lying to her. What happened? He asked quietly. Emma told him everything. Patricia's visit, the stolen money, the fake job, the timeline that made everything so much worse. As she spoke, Marcus's expression grew darker. Emma, this isn't just infidelity. This is fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy. David could go to prison. And I could lose everything, Emma said. Our house, our savings, everything I've worked for could be seized to pay back what he stole. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Do you still want to have the party? Emma laughed, the sound bitter and sharp. What party? Come celebrate my marriage to a criminal who funded his affair by stealing from his company? Congratulations on discovering your husband is facing federal charges. Or, Marcus said carefully, come witness someone refuse to be destroyed by other people's crimes. Emma looked at him. What do you mean? I mean, maybe this party becomes something different than either version you'd planned. Not a celebration of your marriage, or even just an announcement of your divorce. Maybe it becomes your declaration that you won't be buried under other people's choices. Emma felt something shift inside her chest. You think I should still tell everyone? I think you should do whatever feels right to you. But Emma, these people love you. They came here to support you. Maybe they still can, just in a different way than they expected. Emma's phone rang. Rachel. I'm at the florist picking up your arrangements. And they said someone called this morning trying to cancel the order. Please tell me you didn't let David talk you out of whatever you're planning. It wasn't David, Emma said. Ratch, can you come over? Something's happened. On my way. Within an hour, Emma's house had filled with her family. Rachel, their middle sister Sophie, who'd driven down from Portland. Their youngest sister Lily, who'd flown in from Chicago. David's family members started calling too, confused by mixed messages and worried about the cryptic texts they'd been receiving. Emma found herself in the surreal position of hosting an impromptu gathering to explain why the actual gathering might need to be canceled. But as she looked around her living room, at Rachel's fierce protectiveness, Sophie's quiet strength, Lily's determined optimism, Marcus's steady presence, she realized something important. These people hadn't come for David. They'd come for her. I'm still having the party, Emma announced suddenly, interrupting Rachel's tirade about David's character. Em, are you sure? Sophie asked gently. With everything you just told us, maybe you need time to process. I've been processing for 5 years, Emma said. I've been making excuses and managing everyone else's feelings and trying to fix things that were never mine to fix. Tonight, I'm going to tell the truth. All of it. Marcus looked at her with something that might have been admiration. Including the criminal charges? Especially the criminal charges. Emma felt a calmness settling over her that was almost frightening in its intensity. David made choices. Melissa made choices. They can face the consequences of those choices in front of the same people they've been lying to. What if they don't show up? Lily asked. Emma smiled, and for the first time in days it felt genuine. Then I'll have a party surrounded by people who actually love me, celebrating the fact that I'm finally free from people who don't. As her sisters scattered to handle last-minute party details, Marcus stayed behind. Emma, he said quietly, can I tell you something? Of course. When I was married before my divorce, I spent 2 years knowing my wife was cheating and pretending I didn't see it. I was so afraid of being alone, of admitting failure, that I chose living a lie over facing the truth. Emma looked at him, seeing vulnerability in his expression that matched her own. What changed your mind? I realized that being alone was better than being with someone who made me feel alone. Marcus paused. You're the bravest person I've met in a long time. Something passed between them, not romance exactly, but recognition. 2 people who'd survived betrayal and found themselves on the other side. Marcus, Emma said, will you do something for me tonight? Anything. When I tell everyone what David and Melissa did, when I show them who I really am underneath all the pretending, will you photograph that moment? Not to publish or share, but just for me. So I remember what it felt like to finally tell the truth. Marcus stepped closer, his hand reaching up to touch her face gently. Emma, I'd be honored to witness that. As the afternoon sun streamed through her windows, Emma realized that this was what courage felt like. Not the absence of fear, but the decision that something else was more important than being afraid. Tonight, she would face 53 people and tell them that the life they'd thought they were celebrating had been built on lies. She would risk their judgment, their pity, their discomfort. But she would also discover, finally, what it felt like to be herself without apology. And if David and Melissa chose to show up and face the truth they'd created, that was their choice to make. Emma was done making choices for anyone but herself. The liberation was about to begin. By 4 p.m., the botanical gardens looked like a magazine spread for a wedding that would never happen. Emma stood at the entrance, watching the catering staff arrange tables under the pergola where she'd planned to renew her vows. White roses and baby's breath, Melissa's favorite flowers, Emma realized with a sick twist in her stomach, cascaded from every surface. The jazz quartet she'd hired was setting up near the pond where David had proposed, their instruments gleaming in the late afternoon sun. Everything was perfect for a celebration that was about to become an execution. Emma! Marcus appeared beside her, his camera bag slung over his shoulder. How are you holding up? I keep thinking about David's mother, Emma said quietly. She's going to be here in 2 hours, expecting to watch her son recommit to the woman she considers a daughter. Instead, she's going to learn he's a criminal. Marcus followed her gaze to where the catering staff was setting up the head table, the spot where Emma had planned to sit with David while their families toasted their renewed commitment. It's not too late to change your mind, he said gently. Emma's phone buzzed with a text from her lawyer, whom she'd called after Patricia Caldwell's visit. Reviewed the documents. This is serious federal fraud. You need to distance yourself immediately and file for divorce Monday. Any appearance of complicity could destroy your case. Another text, this one from her sister Rachel. David's family is asking a lot of questions. His mom is confused and upset. Are you sure about this? And another from an unknown number. Emma, this is David. Please don't do this to my family. I'll confess everything to the police myself. Just don't humiliate my parents in front of everyone they know. Emma stared at the last message, feeling something crack inside her chest. Even now, facing criminal charges, David was trying to manage her response. Trying to control the narrative, protect his family's reputation, minimize the consequences of his choices. But what about her family? What about her reputation? What about the consequences she was facing for crimes she didn't commit? Marcus, she said quietly, my lawyer says I could be charged as an accessory if I don't distance myself from David immediately. Being here tonight, acting like we're still married, could be seen as trying to cover for him. Marcus's face went pale. What does that mean? It means that by having this party, by telling this story publicly instead of just filing for divorce quietly, I could be making myself look guilty of conspiracy. Emma, and it means, she continued, her voice growing hollow, that you probably shouldn't be here tonight. If this becomes a criminal case, if I'm charged as an accessory, anyone who helped me could be seen as part of a cover-up attempt. Marcus set down his camera bag. Are you firing me? I'm protecting you. Emma's voice broke slightly. I can't let you get dragged into this mess. What if I want to be dragged into it? Emma looked at him. This man who'd started as a vendor and somehow become her anchor in the storm. Why would you want that? Because someone should witness what it looks like when a person chooses truth over safety. Someone should document what courage looks like, even when it's terrifying. Before Emma could respond, her phone rang. David's mother. Emma, sweetheart, David just called me. He's saying some very confusing things about canceling tonight and about problems with work. What's going on? Emma closed her eyes, picturing Carol's face, kind, trusting, completely unprepared for what was about to shatter her world. Carol, Emma's voice failed. How do you tell a mother that her son is a criminal? How do you destroy a family's faith in someone they love? Honey, just tell me what's wrong. Whatever it is, we can fix it. That simple faith, the same faith Emma had clung to for months, broke something inside her. Carol believed problems could be fixed because she'd never faced a problem like this. She'd never discovered that the person she trusted most had been systematically destroying everything she thought she knew about him. I can't, Emma whispered into the phone. Carol, I can't do this to you. Do what to me? Emma, you're scaring me. Emma hung up and immediately called Rachel. I can't do this, she said as soon as her sister answered. I can't destroy his family. They don't deserve this. Em, where are you? You sound. I'm calling it off. The party, the announcement, everything. I'm just going to file for divorce quietly and let David handle telling his own family about the criminal charges. Emma Sterling, don't you dare. Rachel. No. Listen to me. Do you remember what you told me when I caught Jake cheating 3 years ago? When I wanted to keep quiet because I didn't want to embarrass his parents. Emma remembered. Rachel had discovered her then-fiancé with another woman 2 weeks before their wedding. She'd wanted to call off the engagement, but keep the reasons private, to protect Jake's reputation and spare his family's feelings. You told me that protecting someone from the consequences of their actions isn't kindness. It's enabling, Rachel continued. You said that every time we cover for someone's bad choices, we're teaching them that other people will clean up their messes. This is different. How? How is this different? David didn't just cheat, Emma. He committed crimes. He stole money to fund his affair while you worried about paying bills. He put your financial future at risk while you tried to save your marriage. How is protecting him from facing that publicly any different from what you told me not to do? Emma sank onto a bench near the garden entrance, feeling the weight of her own advice coming back to haunt her. Because his family will be collateral damage, she said. And you've been collateral damage for over a year. When do you matter as much as everyone else? The question hung in the air like an accusation. When did Emma matter as much as David's reputation? As much as Carol's feelings? As much as avoiding uncomfortable conversations? I don't know how to be that selfish, Emma admitted. It's not selfish to tell the truth about what someone did to you. As Emma sat in the garden where her life was supposed to be reborn, she felt the full weight of the impossible choice she faced. Stay quiet and protect innocent people from painful truths, but also protect David from facing real consequences. Or speak up and risk destroying multiple families, losing her own financial security, and facing potential criminal charges herself. Her phone buzzed with another text from David. I'm coming to the party. Whatever you're planning to say, I'll say it first. I won't let you destroy everyone we love just to hurt me. Emma stared at the message, feeling something cold settle in her stomach. David was coming. He was going to control the narrative, manage the damage, spin the story to minimize his culpability and maximize her vindictiveness. He was going to make himself the victim of her anger rather than face being the perpetrator of his crimes. Marcus, she said, looking up at him with desperation in her eyes. What if I'm wrong about this? What if I'm about to destroy innocent people just because I'm angry? Marcus sat beside her on the bench. Emma, can I ask you something? She nodded. If someone you loved was in this situation, if Rachel or one of your other sisters discovered their husband had been stealing money to fund an affair, what would you want them to do? Emma thought about it. If Rachel called her tomorrow and said her husband had embezzled money to pay for another woman's pregnancy, what would Emma's advice be? I'd want her to protect herself legally, she said slowly. I'd want her to make sure his crimes didn't destroy her life too. And would you want her to tell the truth about what happened? Yes, because otherwise he'd just do it to someone else. Marcus nodded. So why are you holding yourself to a different standard than you'd hold someone you love? Emma felt tears she'd been holding back for hours finally spill over. Because I'm tired, she whispered. I'm so tired of making hard choices and facing difficult conversations and being the one who has to fix everything. Then don't fix anything, Marcus said gently. Just tell the truth and let other people decide how to handle it. In the distance, Emma could see guests beginning to arrive. Her aunt and uncle from Oregon, David's college friends, colleagues who'd known them as a couple for years. People who'd brought gifts and dressed up and cleared their calendars to celebrate a love story that had never existed. They're all going to hate me, Emma said. Some of them might, but the ones who matter will understand that you're not the one who created this mess. You're just the one brave enough to stop pretending it doesn't exist. Emma's phone rang again. This time it was an unknown number, but she recognized the voice when she answered. Emma, this is Melissa. Please don't hang up. Emma almost did, but something in Melissa's tone stopped her. What do you want? I want to tell you that David's on his way to the party, and he's not planning to confess. He's planning to blame you. He's going to say you've been unstable since your father died, that you're making accusations because you can't handle him being successful. The words hit Emma like a physical blow. He's going to say I'm lying. He's going to say you're having a breakdown. That the company investigation is based on false accusations you made out of jealousy. Emma felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Not only would David avoid consequences for his crimes, he'd make her look insane for reporting them. Melissa, she said carefully, why are you telling me this? Because as much as I love him, what he's planning to do to you is wrong. And because, Melissa's voice broke. Because I'm scared of what he'll do to me if I'm not useful to him anymore. The line went quiet except for Melissa's ragged breathing. He told me this morning that if the company presses charges, he'll say I blackmailed him into the affair. That I threatened to hurt you if he didn't pay for my pregnancy expenses. Emma felt her vision blur. David wasn't just planning to destroy her reputation. He was planning to destroy Melissa's too, the moment it became convenient. Melissa, where are you? I'm at home. I can't come to the party. I can't face you or your family after what I've done. Are you safe? I don't know. David called an hour ago screaming about how I'd ruined his life by getting pregnant. He said if I ever loved him, I'd disappear until this all blows over. Emma closed her eyes, understanding with crystal clarity what David's plan was. Pin the financial crimes on Melissa's manipulation. Paint Emma as unstable and vindictive. Emerge as the victim of two women who'd conspired to destroy him. It was brilliant, really. And it would probably work. Melissa, Emma said quietly, do you have copies of the bank statements? The fake consulting contracts? Anything that proves David initiated the financial arrangements? Yes. I kept everything because I was scared something like this would happen. Good. Meet me at the party. Emma, I can't. Yes, you can. Because if you don't, David wins. He destroys both of us and faces no consequences for any of it. After hanging up, Emma looked at Marcus, who'd heard enough of the conversation to understand the stakes had just gotten higher. He's not just trying to avoid consequences, she said. He's actively planning to destroy me to save himself. Marcus's jaw tightened. Then we make sure that doesn't happen. Emma stood up, feeling something she hadn't experienced in months. Absolute clarity. This wasn't about revenge anymore, or even about justice. This was about survival. David had made his choice. Now she would make hers. Marcus, I need you to photograph everything tonight. Not just the pretty moments or the dramatic ones. Everything. Because if this goes to court, I want evidence of exactly who said what and when. Emma. And I need you to know that being here might cost you. If David follows through on his plan, anyone who supports me could become a target. Marcus picked up his camera bag. Then I guess we'd better make sure we win. As the first guests entered the garden, Emma realized she was no longer walking into a party. She was walking into a battle. And for the first time in her life, she was prepared to fight not just for what was right, but for her right to exist without other people's lies defining her. The darkest hour was about to begin. But on the other side of it, finally, was the truth. At 6:03 p.m., as Emma stood beside the pergola where she'd planned to renew her vows, she realized that 53 people had become silent witnesses to the most important conversation of her life. The party had started normally enough. Guests mingled with champagne and confused smiles, clearly sensing something was off but unable to pinpoint what. Emma's family clustered protectively near the entrance while David's relatives gathered by the gift table, everyone exchanging worried glances and half-whispered questions. Then David arrived. He entered the garden like he was walking into a boardroom he owned, wearing the charcoal suit Emma had bought him for their anniversary last year. His smile was confident, practiced, designed to put everyone at ease while he positioned himself as the reasonable party in whatever drama was about to unfold. Ladies and gentlemen, David's voice carried across the garden with the authority of someone accustomed to commanding rooms. Thank you all for being here tonight. I know Emma has some things she'd like to share with you, but before she does, I think there are some clarifications that need to be made. Emma felt the crowd's attention shift between them like spectators at a tennis match. This wasn't how she'd planned to do this. She'd wanted to control the narrative, to tell her story in her own words. But David was already rewriting the script. My wife, David continued, his voice carrying just the right note of loving concern, has been under tremendous stress since her father's passing. Grief affects people differently, and sometimes it can cause us to see patterns and conspiracies that don't exist. Emma's stomach dropped. He was doing exactly what Melissa had warned her about, painting her as unstable, unreliable, a grieving woman whose judgment couldn't be trusted. The allegations Emma may have shared with some of you about financial improprieties at my company are unfortunately the result of her misunderstanding some complex business arrangements. My employers have assured me that a full investigation will clear up any confusion. David's mother stepped forward, relief flooding her face. Oh, thank goodness. Emma, sweetheart, you had us all so worried. Emma looked at Carol's trusting expression and felt something crystallize inside her chest. This was the moment. The impossible choice between letting David's lie stand, protecting his family from painful truths while throwing herself under the bus, or speaking up and shattering the illusion that everyone in this garden wanted to maintain. That's not true. The words came out quieter than Emma had intended, but they carried across the suddenly silent garden like a stone thrown into still water. David's smile tightened. Emma, maybe we should discuss this privately. No. Emma's voice grew stronger. We've done enough discussing privately. She looked around the garden at the faces of people she'd loved, people who'd supported her, people who deserved to know the truth even if it made them uncomfortable. David isn't being investigated for financial improprieties, Emma said clearly. He's being investigated for embezzlement. He stole over $170,000 from his company to fund an affair with my best friend. The silence that followed was so complete that Emma could hear the jazz quartet's instruments creaking in the evening breeze. David's confident mask slipped for just a moment, long enough for Emma to see panic flash across his features before he regained control. "Emma, please," he said, his voice heavy with performed sadness. "I know how this looks, but you're not thinking clearly. The stress of trying to get pregnant, your father's death, the fertility treatments that haven't worked." "The fertility treatments I paid for myself," Emma interrupted, "while you were paying for Melissa's prenatal care with stolen money." David's father stepped forward, his face ashen. "Son, what is she talking about?" This was the moment David had hoped to avoid, direct questioning from someone whose opinion mattered to him. Emma watched him calculate his options, weighing lies against truth, reputation against reality. "Dad, Emma's been struggling with some mental health issues. Show them the ultrasound." Every head turned toward the garden entrance, where Melissa stood holding a manila envelope. She looked pale, terrified, but determined in a way Emma had never seen before. "Show them the ultrasound, David. Show them the prenatal appointment receipts charged to your company card. Show them the contract you made me sign as your fake employee." David's composure cracked completely. "Mel, what are you doing?" "What I should have done months ago." Melissa walked toward the center of the gathering, her hands shaking as she opened the envelope. "I'm telling the truth." She pulled out a stack of documents and held them up for everyone to see. Bank statements, medical bills, employment contracts, all the evidence of David's systematic deception. "My name is Melissa Torres," she said to the crowd, her voice gaining strength with each word. "I've been Emma's best friend since college, and I've been having an affair with her husband for over a year. David has been using company funds to pay for our relationship, including my pregnancy expenses and a fake job that pays me $3,000 a month for work I never perform." The garden erupted in shocked murmurs, gasps, angry exclamations from Emma's family. But Emma barely heard them. She was watching David's face as his carefully constructed lies collapsed around him. "You don't understand," David said desperately, looking between Melissa and Emma. "This isn't what it looks like." "Then what is it?" Emma's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Explain to your parents what it looks like when their son commits federal crimes to fund an affair." David's mother was crying now, leaning against her husband as the truth settled over her like a suffocating blanket. Emma felt a stab of pain for this woman who'd loved her like a daughter, but she pushed it aside. Carol's pain was real, but it wasn't Emma's responsibility to manage anymore. "The baby," David said suddenly, turning to Melissa with desperation in his eyes. "Tell them about the baby. Tell them how I what?" Melissa's voice was sharp. "How I forced you to have unprotected sex with me. How I made you steal money to pay for my doctor visits. How I held a gun to your head while you created fake consulting contracts." Emma watched David's final lie die before he could fully form it. He'd planned to paint Melissa as a manipulator, himself as a victim. But Melissa's presence, her evidence, her willingness to implicate herself to tell the truth, had destroyed that narrative completely. "You want to know what really happened?" Melissa addressed the crowd directly. "I fell in love with a married man who convinced me his wife didn't understand him. He told me Emma was cold, that their marriage was over, that he was only staying until he figured out how to leave without destroying her financially." Emma felt each word like a physical blow, but she remained standing. These were truths she needed to hear, even if they shattered her completely. "He paid for everything, hotels, dinners, my medical care, even my rent when I lost my job. I thought it was love. I thought he was sacrificing for us." Melissa's voice broke. "I didn't know he was stealing until this morning when he called me screaming about how I'd ruined his life by getting pregnant." "That's not," David started. "You told me to disappear," Melissa continued, her voice gaining power. "You said if I ever loved you, I'd disappear until this investigation blew over. You were planning to blame everything on me, weren't you? Paint me as the crazy woman who blackmailed you into an affair." The silence that followed was devastating. Emma looked around the garden and saw her truth reflected in every face: shock, disgust, pity, but also understanding. These people weren't seeing an unstable woman having a breakdown. They were seeing a woman who'd been systematically betrayed by the two people she'd trusted most. David's father spoke first, his voice heavy with disappointment. "Son, is this true?" David looked around the garden, at his parents' horrified faces, at Emma's family's protective anger, at the friends and colleagues who'd respected him, at Melissa holding evidence of his crimes, at Emma standing tall despite everything he'd tried to do to her. "I love her," he said finally, looking at Melissa. "I know that doesn't excuse anything, but I love her. And I couldn't figure out how to leave my marriage without destroying Emma, so I thought if I could just." "So you destroyed me instead?" Emma's voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the garden. "You couldn't figure out how to leave me without hurting me, so you decided to commit federal crimes and let me find out by accident?" "Emma, I never meant for it to go this far." "How far did you mean for it to go?" Emma stepped closer to him, and for the first time since she'd known him, she saw David flinch. "When you were stealing money to pay for her medical care while I worried about our bills. When you were creating fake jobs for her while I worked overtime to support us. When you were planning your future with her while I planned anniversary parties for us. How far was far enough?" David had no answer. The man who'd always had words, who'd always been able to explain and justify and manage every situation, stood speechless in front of the wreckage of his choices. Emma turned to address the crowd. Her family, his family, their friends, everyone who'd come to celebrate a love that had never existed. "I asked you all here tonight because I wanted to tell you that I was renewing my vows with David. I'd planned this whole celebration around the idea that love could overcome any obstacle if you worked hard enough at it." She looked at the pergola draped in white roses, at the table set for a romantic dinner, at the photographer documenting the most important moment of her life. "But the truth is, I was the only one working at our marriage. David was working at something else entirely." Emma's voice grew stronger with each word. "And I've learned that you can't save a relationship with someone who's actively destroying it." She turned back to David, meeting his eyes directly for what she realized might be the last time. "I hope the life you're building with Melissa is worth the one you've destroyed with me. I hope your love for her is real enough to survive federal charges and financial ruin, and the knowledge that it was built on lies and theft." David opened his mouth to respond, but Emma held up her hand. "I'm not finished. You came here tonight planning to destroy my reputation, to save yours. You were going to let everyone believe I was having a mental breakdown rather than admit you're a criminal. You were willing to sacrifice my sanity, my credibility, and my relationships to avoid facing consequences for your choices." The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. "But here's what you didn't count on," Emma continued. "I'm stronger than you think I am. I'm braver than you gave me credit for. And I'd rather tell a painful truth than live another day with your lies." She gestured to Marcus, who'd been quietly documenting everything from the edges of the gathering. "I'm filing for divorce Monday morning. I'm cooperating fully with the federal investigation into your crimes. And I'm finally choosing myself over your comfort." Emma looked around the garden one more time, at her sisters' proud faces, at David's parents' devastated expressions, at Melissa clutching evidence of their shared deception, at the guests who'd come to celebrate love and instead witnessed its complete destruction. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she said. "I know this isn't what you expected, but it's what was true. And I've learned that the truth, no matter how painful, is always better than the most beautiful lie." As Emma walked toward the garden exit, she heard David call her name one last time. She paused but didn't turn around. "Emma, wait. We can fix this. I can make this right." She looked back over her shoulder at the man who'd promised to love and honor her, who'd stood in a church 5 years ago and vowed to be faithful and true. "David," she said quietly, "the only thing you can fix now is yourself. I'm done trying to fix us." And with that, Emma Sterling walked away from the life she'd built on other people's lies and into the uncertain but honest future that was finally, completely her own. The impossible choice had been made. Truth over comfort. Herself over everyone else's feelings. Reality over the beautiful illusions that had kept her trapped for so long. Behind her, the party continued in shocked, whispered conversations. Ahead of her, Marcus waited by the garden gate, ready to document whatever came next. For the first time in 5 years, Emma had no idea what that would be. And for the first time in her life, that felt like freedom. Emma sat in Marcus's car outside the botanical gardens for 27 minutes before she realized she was crying. Not the devastated sobbing she'd expected, but quiet tears of relief. The kind that come when you finally stop holding your breath after years of suffocation. Through the windshield, she could see guests still gathered in small clusters throughout the garden, their animated conversations visible even from the parking lot. "Do you want to go back in?" Marcus asked gently. Emma shook her head. "I said what I needed to say." Her phone had been buzzing constantly since she'd left the party. Texts from family members, calls from David's relatives, messages from friends who'd witnessed the confrontation. She'd turned the sound off, not ready to manage anyone else's reactions to the truth she'd finally told. But one notification caught her attention. An email from an unknown address with the subject line, "Thank you for speaking up." Emma opened it. "My name is Sarah Chin. I work at Caldwell Investments. I was David's assistant before he was promoted to partner. After tonight's events, I thought you should know that you're not the first wife he's done this to." Emma's blood went cold. "Marcus, look at this." She showed him the phone, and he read over her shoulder as she scrolled through the message. David had an affair with another employee 2 years ago, Jennifer Walsh from the accounting department. She was married too. David convinced her to help him manipulate expense reports and client billings to fund their relationship. When she got pregnant, he promised to leave his wife and marry her. Emma felt the car tilt around her. "Marcus, David was married before me?" "Keep reading," Marcus said, his voice tight. "Jennifer never knew David was already married to you. He told her his previous marriage had ended in divorce, that he was waiting for the paperwork to be finalized. She was devastated when she found out the truth, but by then she'd already helped him steal over $60,000 from client accounts. David told the company she'd acted alone, that she'd been embezzling money, and he'd discovered it. Jennifer lost her job, her marriage, and her professional reputation. She had to declare bankruptcy because of the legal fees fighting the criminal charges. Emma's hands were shaking as she continued reading. The company covered up the whole incident to avoid bad publicity. David was quietly transferred to a different department with a promotion, the same promotion that eventually made him partner. Jennifer's baby was born 6 months later. David has never acknowledged the child or provided any support. The phone slipped from Emma's numb fingers. He's done this before. Exactly this. With someone else's wife, someone else's money, someone else's life. Marcus caught the phone before it hit the floor. "Emma, there's more," he read aloud. "I was afraid to speak up when the current investigation started because I was part of the cover-up 2 years ago. But seeing you tell the truth tonight, seeing you refuse to let David destroy your reputation the way he destroyed Jennifer's, gave me the courage to contact the FBI with evidence I've been keeping. David Sterling is about to face charges for a pattern of fraud that goes back years." Emma stared out the windshield, trying to process what she'd just learned. David hadn't made a mistake. He hadn't fallen in love and made poor choices in the heat of passion. He was a predator with a system, find vulnerable women, convince them to help him steal money, get them pregnant to deepen their emotional investment, then destroy them when the truth came out. "He was grooming Melissa," Emma said quietly. "Everything he did, the fake job, the stolen money, the pregnancy, he'd done it all before. And he would have done it again," Marcus said. "To the next woman, and the one after that." Emma's phone rang. The caller ID showed Melissa's name. "Emma, thank God you answered. Are you okay?" Emma paused, realizing she didn't know how to answer that question. "I'm confused. Someone just sent me information about Jennifer Walsh." Silence on the other end of the line then. "Who's Jennifer Walsh?" "David's previous affair. The one that ended with her going to prison for embezzlement charges while he got promoted." Emma heard Melissa's sharp intake of breath. "That's not. Emma, David told me you were his first marriage. He said he'd never been serious about anyone before you." "He was married before me?" "No, not married. But he lived with Jennifer for 3 years. He showed me pictures of their apartment, talked about how toxic their relationship was, how she was manipulative and unstable. He said she'd tried to frame him for financial crimes when he broke up with her." Emma felt pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. "Melissa, I think Jennifer was his practice run. And you and we were his perfected system." "What do you mean?" "I mean he learned from his mistakes with Jennifer. This time, he made sure to have a wife at home who couldn't testify against him, and a girlfriend who thought she was helping with legitimate business expenses. 2 victims who couldn't compare notes because they didn't know the other existed." Melissa's voice was barely a whisper. "Emma, I saved all the contracts, all the bank statements, everything. What if he planned for me to be his fall guy? What if all that evidence I kept is actually evidence that makes me look guilty?" Emma's mind raced through the implications. David had created a paper trail that implicated Melissa in conspiracy while protecting himself. If she hadn't spoken up tonight, if Emma had been painted as unstable and vindictive, Melissa would have faced all the criminal charges while David emerged as the victim of 2 manipulative women. "Melissa, where are you now?" I'm still at the gardens, hiding in the bathroom like a coward while your family cleans up my mess. It's not your mess. It's his. And we're going to make sure everyone knows that. Emma told Marcus to drive back to the gardens. As they pulled into the parking lot, she could see that the party had transformed into something entirely different. Not a celebration or even a wake, but a war council. Emma's sisters had taken charge, organizing cleanup while keeping David's family separated from the worst of the drama. David himself was nowhere to be seen. When Emma walked back into the garden, conversations stopped and heads turned. But instead of pity or judgment, she saw something unexpected in people's faces: respect. Rachel approached first, pulling Emma into a fierce hug. I'm so proud of you. For what? For destroying everyone's evening? For humiliating David's parents? For refusing to be destroyed? Rachel stepped back, holding Emma's shoulders. Do you have any idea what you just did? You stood up to someone who had all the power in your relationship and told the truth even when it cost you everything. Emma's Aunt Margaret, a woman who'd never expressed an opinion stronger than her preference for Earl Grey over English breakfast, surprised everyone by speaking up. Emma, dear, that man was going to let you take the blame for his crimes. What you did tonight wasn't cruel. It was survival. One by one, other family members and friends approached Emma with similar messages. Not condolences for her failed marriage, but congratulations for her successful escape. But it was David's father who delivered the most unexpected response. Robert Sterling approached Emma with tears in his eyes, his wife Carol leaning heavily on his arm. Emma, he said quietly, I owe you an apology. Robert, you don't. Yes, I do. When David called us this morning and said you were having some kind of breakdown, I believed him. I've known my son his whole life, and I chose to believe that you were the problem rather than consider that he might be lying to us. Carol stepped forward, her face ravaged by tears but her voice steady. Emma, sweetheart, can you ever forgive us for not seeing what was happening to you? Emma looked at this woman who'd treated her like a daughter, who'd welcomed her into their family with open arms, who was now facing the destruction of everything she'd believed about her son. Carol, David is very good at making people believe what he wants them to believe. I lived with him for 5 years and didn't see it. But we should have seen how much you were struggling, Robert said. All those family dinners where you seemed tired, where David made excuses for why you couldn't stay long. We thought it was just the stress of trying to get pregnant. Emma felt something break open in her chest. You noticed that? Of course we noticed. We trusted David when he said you needed space, that you were dealing with things privately. Carol's voice cracked. We should have reached out to you directly instead of trusting our son to take care of your emotional needs. The kindness in their words, the way they were taking responsibility for not seeing her pain, made Emma realize something profound. Not everyone had been complicit in David's deception. Some people had simply been lied to as effectively as she had. What happens now? Robert asked. With the criminal charges, with your marriage? I don't know, Emma said honestly. But I know I'm not going to spend any more time protecting David from the consequences of his choices. As if summoned by her words, David appeared at the garden entrance. But he wasn't alone. 2 people in business attire flanked him, federal agents, Emma realized with a start. The garden went completely silent as David was led through the crowd toward the parking lot. He wasn't in handcuffs, but the seriousness of his situation was unmistakable. As he passed Emma, he stopped. This isn't over, he said quietly, his voice carrying none of the charm or confidence that had defined him for as long as she'd known him. Yes, it is, Emma replied. It's been over for longer than either of us wanted to admit. David looked around the garden, at his parents' devastated faces, at Emma's family's protective stance, at the friends who now saw him clearly for the first time. You've destroyed everything, he said to Emma. No, she said calmly. I just stopped pretending your lies were my truth. As the agents led David away, Emma felt something she hadn't expected. Not triumph or vindication, but a profound sense of completion. The man who'd controlled her life for 5 years, who'd made her question her own perceptions and minimize her own needs, no longer had any power over her story. Melissa appeared beside Emma as David's car disappeared from the parking lot. Emma, I'm so sorry. For all of it. For believing his lies about you. For thinking I was special. For letting him use me to hurt you. Emma looked at this woman who'd been her best friend, who'd shared her secrets and dreams, who'd been as deceived by David as Emma herself had been. Mel, we were both victims of the same man. The only difference is I was married to him. Do you think you could ever forgive me? Emma considered the question seriously. Could she forgive the betrayal of friendship? Could she separate Melissa's choices from David's manipulation? I don't know, she said honestly. But I know I don't want to carry anger for the rest of my life. So maybe someday. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Emma found herself standing alone with Marcus by the pond where David had proposed 5 years earlier. The jazz quartet was packing up their instruments, and the catering staff was clearing tables that had been set for a celebration that had become something entirely different. How do you feel? Marcus asked. Emma thought about it. Empty, but in a good way. Like I've been carrying around a backpack full of rocks for years and finally realized I could take it off. And scared. Terrified, Emma admitted. I have no idea who I am when I'm not trying to fix David's problems or manage his emotions. I don't know what I want or what I'm good at or what my life looks like now. Marcus turned to face her fully. Emma, can I tell you something? She nodded. When you hired me 6 weeks ago, you spent an hour talking about what you wanted me to capture. Perfect moments, beautiful lighting, images that would make your love story look like a fairy tale. But the whole time you were talking, you seemed miserable. Like you were planning someone else's dream wedding. Emma remembered that consultation, how anxious she'd been to get every detail right. But tonight, Marcus continued, when you stood up in front of everyone and told the truth, that was the first time I've seen you look like yourself. Not like someone playing a role or trying to manage everyone else's feelings. Just you. Something passed between them. Not romance exactly, but recognition. The possibility of connection based on truth rather than performance. Marcus, I need to ask you something. Anything. When this is all over, when the divorce is finalized and the criminal trial is done and I figure out how to rebuild my life, would you maybe want to get coffee sometime? Not as a photographer and client, but as people who've both survived betrayal and came out the other side. Marcus smiled, and Emma realized it was the first genuine smile she'd seen directed at her in months. Emma Sterling, I would love nothing more than to get coffee with the woman brave enough to choose truth over comfort. As they walked toward the garden exit, Emma's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Chun. The FBI wants to interview you about David's pattern of behavior. Are you willing to testify against him? Emma looked at the message, then at Marcus, then back at the garden where she'd just burned down her old life to make room for something new. Yes, she typed back. I'm ready to tell the whole truth. Because that's what tonight had taught her. The truth, no matter how painful or complicated or inconvenient, was always better than the most beautiful lie. And Emma Sterling was finally ready to live in a world built on truth rather than illusion. The climax wasn't David's arrest or Melissa's confession, or even Emma's public declaration of independence. The climax was Emma choosing herself, not just once in a moment of crisis, but as a way of life. Choosing her truth over other people's comfort. Choosing her future over her past. Choosing growth over safety. And as she walked away from the botanical gardens where she'd planned to renew vows that had never been real, Emma felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Excitement about tomorrow. For the first time in her adult life, tomorrow belonged entirely to her. 6 months later, Emma Sterling, soon to be Emma Davies again, she'd decided to reclaim her maiden name. Sat in the coffee shop where she'd first met Marcus for their consultation 6 months earlier. But this time, she wasn't planning someone else's perfect moment. She was simply living her own imperfect, honest life. The criminal trial had ended 3 weeks ago with David sentenced to 4 years in federal prison and ordered to pay restitution of over $300,000. The FBI's investigation had uncovered not just Jennifer Walsh's case, but 2 other women David had financially manipulated in college and graduate school. What Emma had thought was her personal betrayal turned out to be part of a pattern that stretched back over a decade. Melissa had testified against David in exchange for immunity, her cooperation crucial to establishing his history of manipulation and fraud. The baby, a daughter she'd named Hope, had been born 2 months ago. Melissa had moved back to her hometown in Oregon to live with her parents while she rebuilt her life as a single mother. They'd spoken twice since the trial ended. Not friends exactly, but no longer enemies either. 2 women who'd shared the experience of being deceived by the same man, finding their way toward something that might eventually become forgiveness. Emma. Marcus's voice pulled her from her thoughts. You're doing it again. Doing what? She asked, looking up from the photo album spread across their table. That thing where you disappear inside your own head. What are you thinking about? Emma smiled, still getting used to someone actually caring about her thoughts instead of just waiting for her to stop having them. I was thinking about how different these pictures are from the ones I used to take. She gestured to the album, not the leather-bound, perfectly curated anniversary gift she'd made for David, but a simple photo book filled with images from the past 6 months. Marcus had given it to her last week, a collection of moments he'd captured as she rebuilt her life. There was Emma painting the walls of her new apartment, a tiny one-bedroom that was entirely hers, decorated with things she actually liked instead of things that looked good in magazines. Emma laughing with her sisters at Rachel's birthday party, her face open and relaxed in a way it hadn't been in years. Emma at her new job at the non-profit legal clinic, helping other women navigate divorce proceedings and financial abuse cases. "Look at this one," Emma said, pointing to a photo Marcus had taken without her knowing. She was sitting on her apartment balcony reading a book, completely absorbed, a cup of tea cooling beside her. "I haven't read for pleasure in 5 years. I'd forgotten I even liked it." "What were you reading?" Marcus asked, though he'd taken the photo so he already knew. A biography of women who'd rebuilt their lives after major setbacks. "Rachel got it for me, said it was homework for becoming yourself." Emma laughed. "I thought it would be depressing, reading about other people's disasters. But it was actually inspiring. All these women who'd faced impossible situations and found ways to create something better on the other side." Marcus reached across the table and took her hand, a gesture that still surprised Emma with its simplicity. No hidden agendas, no emotional manipulation, just affection offered freely and honestly. "Speaking of creating something better," Marcus said, "I have something to show you." He pulled out his laptop and opened a folder labeled Emma's Liberation Series. The screen filled with photos from that night at the Botanical Gardens, images Emma had never seen before. "Marcus, you don't have to. I want to show you something," he said gently. "Look at this first photo." The image was from early in the evening, before David arrived. Emma stood near the pergola looking lost and terrified, her hands clutched around her phone like a lifeline. Her posture screamed vulnerability, uncertainty, fear. "Now look at this one." The second photo was from after her confrontation with David. Emma walking away from the crowd, her shoulders back, her expression calm but determined. She looked like a different person entirely, not because she was happy but because she was real. And this one, the final image, was from later that night, as Emma sat in Marcus's car processing everything that had happened. Her face was tear-streaked but peaceful, like someone who'd just set down a burden she'd been carrying for years. "Do you see it?" Marcus asked. Emma studied the progression of images, seeing her own transformation documented in real time. "I look free. You look like yourself. The person you were before you learned to disappear into other people's needs." Emma felt tears prick her eyes, not from sadness but from gratitude. For Marcus's kindness, for her family's support, for her own courage in choosing truth over comfort. "There's something else," Marcus said, closing the laptop. "I've been offered a job documenting recovery stories for a national magazine. People rebuilding their lives after addiction, abuse, major losses. Real stories about real transformation." "Marcus, that's amazing. You'd be perfect for that. The thing is, it would require traveling. A lot. I'd be on the road maybe 6 months out of the year." Emma felt something twist in her chest. They'd been officially dating for 3 months, carefully building something real and honest and good. The thought of losing that, of losing him, made her realize how much she'd come to value what they'd created together. "When would you start?" she asked, proud of how steady her voice sounded. "That's up to me. Emma, I want you to know that if you asked me to stay, I would." Without hesitation. Emma looked at him. This man who'd witnessed her at her lowest point and somehow seen her strength instead of her breakdown. Who'd photographed her truth when everyone else wanted her to perform happiness. Who'd become her first experience with love that didn't require her to disappear. "Marcus, I would never ask you to give up an opportunity like that. Even if it means long periods apart? Even if it makes our relationship harder." Emma thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago. Someone who would have immediately started calculating how to make his dream fit her needs, how to minimize her own desires to accommodate his career. Someone who would have been terrified of losing him because she'd never learned to be complete on her own. 6 months ago, I would have panicked at the thought of you leaving," she said honestly. "I would have tried to convince you to stay, or offered to come with you, or found some way to make your decision about my insecurities. And now I know that I'm okay on my own, that I can miss you and support your dreams at the same time." That love doesn't mean making yourself smaller, so someone else can fit. Marcus's smile was radiant. Emma Davies, you continue to amaze me. So you're taking the job? I'm taking the job. And you're going to keep doing the incredible work you're doing at the legal clinic. And we're going to figure out how to love each other across distances because what we have is worth figuring out. Emma felt something she hadn't experienced in her previous relationships, security and uncertainty. Not because she knew everything would work out perfectly, but because she knew she could handle whatever happened. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. For a moment, Emma felt the old anxiety spike. After David's arrest, she'd received hate mail from people who thought she'd been vindictive, supportive messages from other women who'd experienced similar betrayals, and everything in between. But this message was different. Ms. Davies, this is Jennifer Walsh. I saw your interview on the news about domestic financial abuse. Thank you for speaking out. Because of your courage, I've been able to get my embezzlement conviction overturned. My daughter will grow up knowing her mother didn't commit the crimes she was accused of. I hope someday I can thank you in person. Emma showed Marcus the message, feeling tears start again. Emma, do you realize what you did? By speaking up, by refusing to let David control the narrative, you didn't just save yourself. You saved other women too. Emma thought about Jennifer, about the other women who'd been caught in David's web of manipulation and financial abuse. Her decision to tell the truth at that anniversary party hadn't just been about her own liberation. It had been about breaking a cycle that would have continued indefinitely. There's something I want to do, Emma said suddenly. What? I want to go back to the botanical gardens. The place where everything changed. I want to see it again, but this time as the person I am now instead of the person I was then. An hour later, they stood by the pond where David had proposed 5 years earlier. The gardens looked exactly the same, but Emma felt like she was seeing them for the first time. The beauty wasn't tinged with desperation anymore, wasn't weighted with the pressure to create perfect moments for someone else's approval. Can I ask you something? Marcus said as they walked along the path where Emma had confronted David 6 months ago. Always. Do you ever regret it? Speaking up that night instead of handling everything privately? Emma considered the question seriously. The public nature of her revelation had brought complications, media attention, judgment from some of David's supporters, awkward encounters with mutual friends who'd chosen sides. But it had also brought unexpected gifts. Connections with other survivors, opportunities to help women in similar situations, and most importantly, the knowledge that she was capable of choosing truth over comfort. Never, she said finally, because hiding the truth would have meant he'd do it to someone else. And it would have meant continuing to live a lie to protect other people's feelings. And now, Emma looked around the gardens, thinking about how many perfect moments she'd tried to force in this exact spot. How many photos she'd staged, how many romantic gestures she'd planned, how much energy she'd spent trying to create a love story that had never existed. Now I know that the most beautiful moments are the ones you don't have to create. They just happen when you're brave enough to be yourself. As if to prove her point, Marcus lifted his camera and captured Emma in a moment of pure authenticity. Laughing at something she'd said, completely unguarded, her face lit with genuine joy. That one's going in the after series, he said. What after series? Marcus showed her the camera's display. I've been documenting your journey without you knowing. Not for publication or sharing, just for you. So you can see how far you've come. The photo was beautiful, but not in the polished, artificial way of her old anniversary album. It was beautiful because it was real. Emma as she actually was, not as she thought she should be. Marcus, Emma said, taking his hand as they walked back toward the garden exit. Thank you. For what? For seeing me before I could see myself. For documenting my truth when I was still living in lies. For being patient while I figured out who I was without David's manipulation defining me. Emma, you did all the hard work. I just took pictures. As they reached the parking lot, Emma's phone rang. Rachel. Em, are you sitting down? Why? What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Something's right. Really right. That interview you did for the Domestic Abuse Awareness Campaign? It's been nominated for a journalism award. And the legal clinic wants to offer you the position of director for their new financial abuse recovery program. Emma felt the world tilt in the best possible way. 6 months ago, she'd been a woman whose entire identity was built around managing her husband's needs. Now she was being recognized for work that helped other women reclaim their own lives. Rachel, I don't know what to say. Say yes, Em. Say yes to the job. Say yes to the recognition. Say yes to the life you're building for yourself. After hanging up, Emma stood in the parking lot where she'd sat in Marcus's car 6 months ago, crying over the destruction of everything she'd thought she wanted. The same location, but everything was different. She was different. Good news? Marcus asked. The best news. But Marcus, if I take this job, I'll be working just as many hours as you'll be traveling. We'll both be building careers we're passionate about, which means even less time together. Marcus considered this, then broke into a smile that made Emma's heart skip. You know what I think? What? I think we're about to become the kind of couple who makes long-distance work, because we're both living authentic lives. The kind who supports each other's dreams instead of competing with them. The kind who chooses love without losing themselves. Emma felt something click into place. Not the desperate attachment she'd mistaken for love with David, but something stronger and calmer and infinitely more sustainable. Marcus Chun, she said, I think you're right. As they drove away from the botanical gardens, Emma thought about the photo album she'd made for David. All those carefully curated memories designed to convince him their love was worth saving. She'd thrown it away months ago, but now she understood something important about it. Those memories hadn't been fake because the love wasn't real. They'd been fake because she'd been trying so hard to create the perfect story that she'd forgotten to live an authentic life. The photos Marcus had taken of her over the past 6 months weren't perfect. Some were blurry, some caught her at unflattering angles, some documented painful moments she'd rather forget. But they were true. They showed a woman discovering who she was when she stopped performing for everyone else. That night, Emma sat in her apartment looking through both sets of photos, the polished lies from her marriage and the beautiful, messy truths from her liberation. Tomorrow, she would start her new job helping other women escape financial abuse. Marcus would begin planning his documentary project. They would both step into futures that were uncertain, but entirely their own. 6 months ago, Emma had thought she was building memories for a love that would last forever. Instead, she'd been building a foundation for a life that was finally completely hers. She picked up her phone and typed a text to Jennifer Walsh. Thank you for your message. I'd love to meet for coffee when you're ready. We have a lot to talk about. Then she opened a new photo album on her laptop and labeled it Beginning Again. The first photo would be from tonight. Marcus had captured her looking through the old images, her face thoughtful but peaceful. A woman who'd learned the difference between remembering the past and being trapped by it. The second photo would be from tomorrow, whatever that brought. And the day after that, and the day after that. A collection of moments that belonged entirely to her, documented not for perfection but for truth. Because Emma Davies had finally learned the most important lesson of her life. The most beautiful memories aren't the ones you try to create for other people. They're the ones that happen naturally when you're brave enough to live as yourself. And that kind of life, built on truth instead of illusion, was worth every difficult conversation, every uncomfortable revelation, every moment of choosing authenticity over comfort. Emma Sterling had died the night she discovered her husband's betrayal. But Emma Davies had been born from the ashes of that destruction, and she was just getting started.